Hey guys, I've put this PowerPoint together for you to help you as you write your report. Hopefully you'll find this interesting and helpful with citing and also quoting references in your report. Most of you know how to write a bibliography, or at least list the academic sources that you've used. But I want to show you how to properly reference academic sources within your work. Okay. So a research paper can be made stronger through the use of quotations. You might use quotes when you need to cite a key piece of primary source material. You might want to strengthen your argument by getting another writer to support your work, or you might highlight a term of art. It is important to both use quotations effectively and cite them properly to write an effective paper and avoid plagiarizing. So of course, plagiarizing is copying somebody else's work. You can very easily be guilty of plagiarizing without even realizing it if you haven't quoted correctly. So you need to make sure you make it very clear when you're stating somebody else's idea and it's just supporting your work instead of putting it in there as your own. So make sure what you're quoting is an academic source. Now at a university level, you'll most likely quote professional institutions, published academics, or primary sources. In school, however, you're also welcome to quote academic websites as well. What is not an appropriate source to use? Basically, any source that is not written by a professional in the field you are studying, if it is not a primary source from the time period you're studying, or any source where the author is unidentifiable. So I'll just break that down. You can quote secondary sources, so I'm not saying any secondary source is not okay, but a primary source from the time period doesn't have to be something made by an academic. That could be anything. It could be a lamp, it could be a bed, it could be a piece of bark, potentially. So primary sources are not guided by the same rules as secondary sources, but if you are quoting a secondary source, it must be written by a professional in the field you are studying, and you must be able to identify the author. So what I mean by that is if you go online and you research the Black Death in Europe and you find this amazing Prezi presentation that somebody else has created, and there's information on there that you want to use, you cannot cite that as an academic source because you don't know who made that. It could have been a professional, or it also may have been a 4-year-old child. Because we can't identify the author, you are not allowed to cite that source. I'd also say the same for any forums, and of course, Wikipedia. That's always a no. So some things to keep in mind. When I say citation, what I'm describing is a way to provide information on the source where you retrieved a quote or information you're using in your report. Now, there are many different forms of citation. You may have heard of a few of them, but when studying history, the usual format is called MLA, which is Modern Language Association. There are other styles you can use, but this is the style that I'm going to show you today. Something that I will say as well, just back on finding academic sources, I have provided a video for you. I'm not going to show you now, but you can have a look at that later. It's on Schoology. It's called Finding Academic Sources. It's made for university, but I think it would be really useful for you guys as well to have a look at. It just breaks down what an academic source is and what is not an academic source. Okay, so yes, I'm going to show you MLA citation form now. Okay, so here is an example of using a quote, using a reference within your work. Because of the astronomical number of deaths that occurred in England caused by the Black Death, the social status of many people, especially peasants, changed dramatically. Alex Bovey explains that the bubonic plague sparked off a chain of events that would redefine the position of the peasant in England. So you always put in the name of the author. This can be included in a few different ways, but it must be present in your work. So it can be before the quotation is said, it can be introduced within your work, or it could also be in the parentheses after your quotation too. Speaking of these parentheses, that is your in-text citation. So it indicates the place in the article that you retrieve the quote from. Because this source is quoted from a website, I've specified that it was written in paragraph 6. If I'd retrieved this quote from a book, I wouldn't say para 6, I would say P.6, so that's short for page. In your bibliography, you would provide more information on this source, such as the link for the website that you retrieved it from, the year that it was written, etc. But I'll explain this in detail a little later on. So there are multiple ways you can provide information within your report, and you need to choose what works with the point that you're trying to make. So the first way that you can do it is dropped quotes. A dropped quotes is sort of exactly what it sounds like. It wouldn't make a lot of sense without an introduction first. It's almost as if it's been dropped into your explanation. So because of the speedy devastation caused by the Black Death in the 1300s, it is clear that this epidemic was, quote, ultimately responsible for major shifts in the social structure in England, unquote. Bovey, paragraph 6. So with this particular quote, if I was to say that quote on its own in a sentence, it wouldn't make any sense. It'd just read, ultimately responsible for major shifts in the social structure in England. Doesn't make sense. You need to give some context for that quote first. So it usually comprises of only a few words and it gives no information about the speaker. These always have to be introduced within a sentence and they can't be a sentence on their own. So our second method of quoting is full sentence quotes. As the name implies, full sentence quotes are created by quoting complete sentences, but that take up less than 4 lines. Although these are complete sentences, they can't be used as a standalone sentence in your paper. You need to introduce them with an additional complete sentence or a signal phrase. So there's a couple of examples here. First one is using a complete sentence. After the mid-1300s, the workforce had significantly diminished and tensions between social classes were rising. As Bovey points out, resentment among the peasantry was simmering when between 1377 and 1381, a number of taxes were levied to finance government spending. So that is a complete sentence leading into a full sentence quote. You could also use a signal phrase. Bovey asserts that resentment among the peasantry was simmering, blah, blah, blah. That's the quote. So with that, a signal phrase, Bovey asserts that, we are introducing the quote, we're letting the reader know who the author is of that particular quote. So first of all, we'll just take a step back. What is a signal phrase? You may not have heard that before. It's used to preface a quote, which gives us context on who is delivering the information. So some signal phrases might be, Joshua asserts that, however, Tim makes it clear that, or as Annie states, Jemima explains that, according to Priya, as Andy points out. All of these are signal phrases. All of them are appropriate to be used in order to introduce a full sentence quote. So some more methods. We've got block quotes next. So block quotes are multiple sentences that take up more than 4 lines. So full sentence quotes are less than 4 lines. Block quotes are more than 4 lines. Because they take up a lot of physical space, you shouldn't use too many of them. A maximum of 1 to 2 for a complete paper. So I would definitely never do more than 2. You can incorporate a block quote by adding a complete line space between your own content and the quote, and offset it by indenting the entire quote to the right a single time. So you can see in the example that I've done here, I've got my introductory sentence where I'm saying, okay, this person, Froissart, describes the peasants' revolt in detail. I've got a colon there, and then I've indented my block quote to make it very clear that it is not my work. I also include a parenthesis at the end of the quote. So using a colon to indicate that you're about to start a block quote, and then indenting your block quote, so it is clearly separated from your own work, and then citing the source after the full stop, not before. The difference with that is normally, if we go back a little bit, normally the parentheses would actually be inside the full stop. I don't know if you can see in the examples there. The full stop comes after the parentheses, not before. Okay, so the last one is indirect quotes. An indirect quote, or paraphrasing, is when you use a sentence from a source, but you change the wording slightly into your own words. So you can't use quotation marks because you're not quoting it exactly the way that the academic source has stated it. You're using your own words, but you're really saying the same thing. This is useful when you can't meet rubric requirements by quoting, or if maybe you've used too many quotes. Be careful to avoid plagiarism though by changing at least 50% of the sentence. So between 1377 and 1381, resentment between the upper class and the lower class of society was growing. New taxes were passed to finance government spending, which prompted a violent rebellion in June 1381, known as the Peasants' Revolt. The rebellion would ultimately end in failure. A number of prominent rebels were killed. King Richard stopped the rebellion by promising reforms, but instead, punishments on the rebels were extremely harsh. Now I have my parentheses after that, but I haven't used quotation marks because I've actually changed a lot of those words myself. I'm just saying the exact same thing. So indirect quotes can be really good if you've used too many quotation marks already, or if you want to state something in your own words, but you feel it's just a little bit too similar to a source that you've already used. So you must paraphrase the information provided by the source into your own words, otherwise you're simply copying. Okay, moving on to bibliography, the very, very fun part. Most of you are extremely capable of providing a link to a website in your bibliography, but there is a little more to it than that. In a proper bibliography, more information needs to be provided. So we have the MLA referencing style here. I've included websites, journal articles, and books because they're all just a little bit different from each other. You can see for a book, you must include the name of the publisher of the book and the place of publication, and then you would have the publication date, but the year only. You wouldn't be putting in June 21st, 2018. MLA referencing style for a journal article, so an academic source that you've located online. That's got a little bit more information. Now, if you do find something like that you want to quote in your report, please talk to me first so I can show you exactly how to do that, because that is a little bit more difficult and more of a tertiary level of research. And then, of course, we have the website, which is the first one. I would expect most of you to be utilizing that referencing style in your work. There are other resources that you can quote from as well. So you can also quote from videos, podcasts, anything like that. If you come across one of these you would like to use, I can show you how to. But for now, I'm just going to keep it with website, journal article, and book because they are the most common. So we have some examples here that are from real sources. So you can see the author's name is always put back to front. So last name first, first name second. It's also, if you're doing a list of references, it's always alphabetical order in MLA. So alphabetical order going by the first letter of the last name, so the first letter on the list. So have a little look at that one there. I'll just leave the slide there for a moment so you can have a look at how it's done. Now, keeping in mind, I will have these slides on Schoology as a PDF, so you can always come in and have a look at how it's done and just include the right information for the sources that you're using. So you probably don't need to worry too much about journal articles, as I said before, but the information is there if you need. I want you to focus on correctly citing books and websites. I really hope that some of you have the opportunity to use a book as a source. Your bibliography should always be in alphabetical order by the first letter of the author's last name. Okay, so good luck. Remember to note down websites that you visit as you conduct your research, not at the very end, because you really don't want to get to the end and forget what information came from where. Make sure that your bibliography is the first thing that you create in your report so that you can continuously add links or titles of books to it, and you can always fill in the other information later. I hope you've enjoyed. I hope it's helpful. Good luck with everything, and please let me know if you need a hand.